Hello, everybody, and thank you again for joining us on Change Itself. I'm here with Eric Demers, and we're coming at you with a new episode that I think would be exciting for you to consider, even though it might be a little bit of a complex topic as a whole. But change and change management and change communications can sometimes be an overwhelming thought for most. And we're here to cover a little bit about that. And if you're new to our show, please you can reach us on changeitself.com for more episodes, or Change Itself at LinkedIn. And once again, hit the like button, the comment button, leave your comments and interact with us as much as possible. We'd love to hear from you and learn from you along the way. As it give us a lot of ideas for our next topics, right? So, Eric, how are things, and what do you think about change communications as a whole?
It's another loaded question, but no, things are good. Thanks. Change communication. I think it's something that can't be understated and can't be underappreciated. If you don't communicate, you're going to get what you get. Back to a couple previous episode from a couple episodes ago around stakeholder engagement. There's a really, really good opportunity if you manage your communications properly to really smooth over that stakeholder engagement and really help the change work out or get accepted a lot faster, a lot less resistant, a lot less time and energy. So let's dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest part is the vision, right, behind why is this change happening in the first place is probably the part that we want to start off the most is that and especially being a vendor. So what we go to organizations all the time to start introducing what could be, and even though we're leaning into their processes and we're leaning into their ways of being, and we're replacing in kind what's going on there. We're just there to support it, right? So a lot of times it's like, yeah, thanks for the training session, or thanks for your input or your advice, but I'm just going to keep doing what I want, right? And that's not the case. So we work very much on at the very first chance we get is, what is that leadership message directly from the organization? Why does this matter to everybody from your perspective? And let's start with that, right? Have you had any success from that regard as well, as far as like just starting with, what is the vision of this implementation or the change that you're putting in place, so that we can all at least be aligned on the goal, right?
Yeah, I think you've touched on one of the most important parts. Is the leadership and the leaders, not just approval of the project, but support of the change or the project and leading the change or the project. If it's, yeah, we're making the change and then not checking in or not, and it's not seen as important. I've seen change initiatives really struggle, where I've seen it be really important and regular check-ins, and the why really comes out and communicated, and people connect with it, right? If you can connect with the why for the change, and that comes through communicating it, then people are all in. So yeah, I fully would support that and agree with that leadership why and vision is definitely a key to successful change management, and really the premise of where to start for your change communication. I would fully agree with that.
Yeah, and then because I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. Is sometimes change takes a long time. Actually, most times it takes a long time, right? Like even like, hey, everybody, we want your email signature to say this now, and it becomes a 6-month exercise to get everybody to transition over. We've all been through that. But what happens with these longer initiatives, and when you're driving to get to that end result, is that sometimes there's certain levels of complexity that come into play, and different insights and different inputs along the way. And then here you are 6 months, 1 year, 2 years down the journey, and you're like, why are we doing this in the first place? Like, I remember we said we were going to do this, but I've completely lost track on why we're even doing it. So having that recorded statement in the beginning certainly helps you not only initiate the whole process, but to also keep it alive, when you've got different stakeholders in and out, and you've got transitions through the companies, and, you've got time that happened, right? And yeah, it's probably one of the most critical parts for sure in that whole process.
So when you're talking about time and longer duration changes, which I think I understand what you mean, and the complexity. So anytime a change, most changes, bigger changes like cultural changes or with a large number of people involved, in my experience, have taken a long time and are not something that just happens necessarily overnight, right? And that's where some of the complexities I've seen come in are complexities around other change initiatives competing with your change initiative. I've seen different, culture backlashes where like someone doesn't want to do something that way, or a subculture is formed to do things sometimes differently, or they're not used to that. And so I've seen that, like the length of time be of complexity. And I've also seen the importance of consistency in your messaging throughout the change initiative, even if it's going to take a long time, and taking a stand for that change and making it important and really following through and supporting it and not wavering, because there are going to be instances where it would just be easier to give up, right? Or to just do it the old way or do it the other way. It's really easy. But if you're consistent, unwavering, and you take a stand for that change because it's important for you, it's connected to the why, you're consistently talking about it, you start to build momentum where the team and others start to join you in that same conversation, and they start to see it and live it. And it just kind of builds momentum. It's like that snowball rolling down the hill. It keeps growing and growing and growing. And eventually you reach that quote unquote tipping point where like, it's just there, it's happened. Like there's no going back. Right. Yeah. And sometimes you try to go back, that's when you know you've succeeded. It's painful to go back to the old way. So just for complexity, that's kind of how I see it. I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at or alluding to.
That's exactly it, right? That's exactly it. Because sometimes your big snowball will break in half or three parts, and then the three parts of the snowball started from the same point, but they look very different at the end. And then you get to the end and you're like, hold on here, we're not even implementing the same thing anymore. Like let's get back on track, right? So having that North Star in that change. And I think, one of the other things that we can touch on as well is like how to communicate that change, right? Because a lot of organizations or a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm in a position of power. I'm going to say this is what we're going to do. And then that's it. When we go through how to be a trainer or how to educate people, we get taught that there are several ways that people learn how to do anything, right? Like some of them it's from reading, some of them it's from doing it with their hands, some of them is from watching a YouTube episode. Or some of them is from reading an email or just being told. There's all kinds of that stuff. So when it comes to change communications, I think it's important to put in your framework that you're going to send this message that's going to cover these things by email. You're going to cover these things by a post-it that's on the wall. You're going to cover these things through a meeting that happens once a month. You're going to cover these things through maybe a video communication that you've recorded the CEO or the CEO or somebody talking about what this change is. Like it has to be multifaceted and multi-layered, because as much as we like to think that people just absorb, I told them to do this or I told her to do that, it does to a certain degree, but it also stops very, very quickly.
It's also very helpful because we're humans and we we're creatures of habit, right? And so if we're consistent in where we deliver the message, how we deliver the message, where someone could expect to go get information, things flow quite easily. And I mean, if you don't mind, Gus, I'll share some couple real life
go ahead.
And they're learned the hard way. I mean, I've read the books and I've done the courses that tell you to prepare the change management plan and communicate it and all this stuff. And that's a lot of work, and you don't need that. And nobody reads those messages anyways, right? I can tell you from the school of hard knocks, in implementing Sofvie in the beginning, especially as we were growing with Sofvie and Technica kind of at the beginning of things, and there are lots of releases. And so really what a release is the products being updated new features are available. Sometimes required us to have an outage and to reset some things. And at the beginning, just wasn't managing the change well. I was just kind of letting it happen. And if there is an outcome, then I would go back and communicate to everybody what happened or why it happened or why a certain change needed. And there was no like conversation of like leading up to this change so that the change went smooth. None of that existed. It was just I'll call it management from the hip, right? And you'd get all kinds of backlash. I was disrupting people's day, people's work. They weren't able to, the simplest thing, like they get up or they go underground for their shift and they couldn't open the pre-op or the lineup from the day, but they got the lineup. The person talked to them, they could have even printed it off on a piece of paper, but because they didn't know it was coming and that was going to happen, it was a huge disruption. And so it started after one of the, probably one of the bigger impacts that we had. I was like, okay, I got to do something different. Like, what's in my control here? And so I sat down at that point with Gus, and Gus gave me a list, like the different types of updates that we could expect. And then I put a communication plan together on how frequently we'd communicate, what we would communicate, how far ahead of time. And I just started implementing that. So I'll say like a big release, we had one a couple of weeks ago, which I'll tell you guys a funny story in a second, where we're going from a 1.5 to 1.6. In that one, I had committed to 2 weeks before. I'll let everybody know that there's a change coming and any impacts are expected and what's expected in it. And that would be by email. And that I would put a memo together, and the week before I would remind everybody. And then 24 hours before, I would send out one final reminder for people. And in this last release, and so I've been doing this now since like 2019, very consistently. So 4 years, people are expecting this messaging. And I'm telling myself, nobody reads those things anyways. I'd never get any feedback about it. And so this new release was coming, and I had looked at and evaluated it. And it really looked to me as if it was all on the administrator end. I was the only one that was going to notice this change. It wouldn't impact anybody else. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to and things just caught up with me in changing roles and in a new role. And it slipped. I didn't get the communications in time. And there was a 5-minute outage where people, weren't able to access it in the middle of the day. And then the tickets started flooding in of like, Sofvie's down and it's there's a disruption. I can't get to this. And I was like, man, like that highlighted for me how much that communication plan actually worked out. And so we have different, communications for different things, but I didn't follow it. And I sure enough found out about it, because had I submitted or sent the communication, people who've been expecting it, it'd have been nice and smooth, and things have been back up and running, and they were within 5 minutes. And it was an expected outage that I failed to communicate. And then the impact that had on people's day was unreal. And then so we have different things. So like a bug fix, for example, is very low key. There's no real impact. So we're testing things ahead of time to make sure there's no impact to people. And then we'll let them know 48 hours in advance. And it just flows through smoothly. Nothing happens, no feedback. And so when we follow those things that we've set out, we get some really good results. And I was shocked to find out that people were reading those emails and those memos, because I thought I was writing them for myself just to satisfy this plan that I built a long time ago. But the plan was put there because we felt the pain, and it was important to keep people informed. And in order to maintain that engagement and maintain the consistent, stable, reliability of whatever initiative, in this case, it's Sofvie that people expect. When there's going to be a disruption, just by telling people, it, really calms people down, and they're expecting it, and the change goes smoothly, right? But if it's a surprise, then it's like right away, the worst that you've ever experienced is right there for you again, and it's happening for you. And so that's been my experience. And so a really good established communication plan that is proven is really, really helpful tool.
And if you think about from this particular experience, like culturally, the shift that was created because of that strategic plan that was in place, rewind back, 4 or 5 years ago, we could have been down for 2 days and heard almost nothing. Right. And then we're like,
Yeah.
hey, we're at, and then now like 5 minutes and it's a catastrophic event. Right. So,
Yeah.
so it just proves that when done well and when the change sticks, that this is your new way of being now. There's no going back. Like this is just now what people are depending on. And to your point, when they're communicated properly, how things can go really well. And then the minute you kind of let your guard down a little bit, that whoop, this one just slides through, and then you get kind of reminded why those policies and procedures you put in place are so valuable. So now, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. It's certainly
Yeah. And
resonated with me.
as the person in charge of the change initiative, like I take it as like it is my responsibility to make sure that that is communicated so that nobody experiences that impact. And that, to me, that's an important piece. I'm like, it's important to me that there's no impact to the end user from this, and that it's not just a fly by night. Well, we might or we might not. Like, it's you've got to take responsibility for it, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and it's funny because we have this conversation with a lot of stakeholders for specifically this result, and then we get asked all the time, well, we say you're going to make sure, right? Like you are sending out this communication to everybody because it's going to be an impact, and we want to make sure that everybody understands. And they're like, yeah, it's fine. Like, what difference does it make, right? And this is the difference that it makes. Right? This is the difference that it makes.
Maybe other question for you, because so that was a situation where there's like the specific plan to communicate in a certain way to a mass, like big group of people. In the background of that, there's a lot of cascading communication happening from, senior management to our line managers and to the workforce. Like that's also happening. So maybe I can ask you that question is like in cascading messages, and back to your point around leadership, like having like the leader's why and message. I've seen it hugely important when that message is cascaded and then consistently repeated and passed along to make sure that everybody's getting the same message and consistent message with the right intent. Have you seen good examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, whenever you're having these conversations, it's no different than selling a product or selling a service or selling, like if you're trying to get new business, for example, right, and you're trying to sell a service or a product or a piece of hardware, whatever the case may be, everybody around you is going to want to know, when I show up in front of people, what do I say that properly represents this service or this product? Because I want to make sure that I'm not delivering false hope, and I want to make sure that I'm actually delivering the value in the right way, so that if the goal is that we want this to sell, that I don't botch the job, right? And if you take that same exact scenario and apply it to whatever it is that you're trying to communicate internally, it's the exact same thing. Like you're trying to sell what the next steps are going to be. You're trying to sell what the new future looks like. You're essentially a salesperson at this point, right? Trying to commit something in the organization. So it only makes sense to say, by the way, I'm recruiting a whole bunch of salespeople here. I need outbound sales. I'm recruiting you to help me in this journey. This is the message that you got to deliver. And if you deliver it in this way, we're going to get a consistent result. If you deviate from script and start assuming other things, just understand that those assumptions are going to lead down a path of disappointment, because you may have interpreted this message to mean this, but that's not what they're going to get, right? And I think from that perspective, it's good to also train and educate people that you want to pass on and cascade the message in the same context.
Yeah, one of the tools that I've seen useful, and it's not every change or every situation where this tool, will pull it out and put the time, energy, and effort into making sure that we get the framework of the communication properly, but we'll do what we'll call a leadership message, right? And then one of our management team or leaders will craft the framework of the message, and the why is in there, and we'll communicate to, it's not going to read the forms, it's not genuine, but that's their intent. And so it serves as a good reminder and refresher to go back and reset the intent. And even sometimes we'll share that message like that, the printed version. I'm still going to deliver the message verbally, but it like reinforces the conversation and the why, and it keeps, things on track. I've seen it work very well in very difficult situations on really touchy, change subjects. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful tool. Now, careful not to, overuse it, but in the pick and choose, I'll pick and choose the times to go use it. And it's a useful tool. Set context for, the change, why we're doing it, what the world might look like if we don't go down this path, or we don't do this thing that we want to do, and then what we're asking for help with. And that kind of recipe really works very well to make sure that we're getting a really good, consistent message, and that everybody is bought into it. Like they believe in it. Like they're good with it. They left there, and that's what they believe that is the right thing to do.
And it can also hold you to account to it, because for the CPQQRT or CPQQTR, whichever way you want to say it, once there's once you're accustomed to communicating in that way, the next time you try to push them, they'll be like, yeah, okay, cool. Give me give me that master document and I'll run with it. Right. And I know internally this is happening to us now, and we've gotten down that regiment of having those I's dotted and T's crossed. And in a minute you just say, hey, we're just going to go do this. They're like, no, we're not. You're going to give me the information that you normally deliver, and then I'll go. Right. So
but you think about you're talking about it, and like the value in that, and like the reduction in the error of the message getting communicated sideways, right? The decision fatigue that goes away from being very clear on what the communication is. Like I'm not having to like, ooh, do I say that? Do I not say that? How do I deliver it? Did I deliver it the right way? Okay, like, do I need to prep my own message before I go do that piece? It takes a weight off your shoulders, and you're like, yes, okay, good, this is what it is. And then the benefit is it's consistent, but it takes away a lot of that uncertainty from the team at times, and it is really helpful tool.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, I think we've jammed quite a bit of context and information in here around the importance around communication to change. And and again, if you want more tips on change management, right? We got changeitself.com. We've got a whole lot of great episodes with a whole lot of great people that come on board. But on this note, we'll leave you all with this, and I hope you had a lot of value or gained a lot of value from what we discussed, and maybe take some of those lessons and bring it on. And we'd be more than welcome. You're more than welcome to drop off some of your comments as well, or send us some messages to tell just to explain how you guys are doing it, and what does the organization look like for where you're at, and how you gain some success. Because we're certainly not the be all and all and end all of change communications, because I've never seen anybody score a 10 out of 10 in communications, if you ask me. And we look forward to your feedback. So again, maybe Eric will remind our viewers, changeitself.com, or you can go to Change Itself on LinkedIn. And we're looking forward to seeing you interact with our episodes. And until then, Eric, I guess we're signing off.
Have a great one. Thank you for joining us.